So, we just had balance. Now, I did the big video on my main channel with Boots speculating as to the differences. And Boots doesn't PvP as much as me, so I can't go into that side of the game as much as I'd like to. Well, on this video, I want to talk about one of the main outcomes of the patch. And it's a big one. In fact, since I kind of started PvPing again a bit back, through all the balance patches, I haven't seen something as wildly significant as this one in terms of how much it's changed the face of the game. Quite often the devs, even like with the big, ridiculously overpowered Mesmer rework, which was kind of just before around when I was looking back at the game, the PvP side of the game, even that kind of doesn't feel like as major as this, as absurdly overpowered as Mesmer, became after that. I think because there are a lot of Mesmers around already. Essentially, the main thing that's changed here is Scrapper has been added to the game. Not just added to the game, it's actually really, really strong, and there's a ton of them. So, I want to talk a bit about it, the pros, the cons, and I'll intersplice the one game I've played today on Scrapper. And you'll see here on the pre-game lobby, this is a fairly high-rated game. This is like top 30-ish, and it's 4 scrappers on the game. Most games have around 4 scrappers at the moment, which is a lot. And so the reason for this is Scrapper's an extremely powerful side noder right now that scales reasonably well at team fights too, sort of in a similar way to how Soul Beasts do, in that, they pop their stances and give everyone lots of AoE buffs. Well, Scrappers, when they're node and they have the luxury to rotate to a larger engagement, they have a lot of AoE support by the way of super elixirs, by the way of reflects, stability, and the gyros themselves. Now, the gyros are really the big change, so let's get into it. What happened with the release is gyros, they're still flavored as gyros, but they've been reclassified as wells. No longer are they like minions that spawn next to you. They're attached to the scrapper. So when I use my blast gyro here, you'll see the blast gyro is still in the game. He's just really small and he's next to me. He does his effect and then he leaves. If I use my heal gyro, he appears here. And if I spawn multiple gyros, they all kind of float around me like so. And it's, effect-wise kind of nice. And the principle of the change I really adore, because it's less minions, it's less Zoe stuff, and that's always good, even though gyros and Scrapper was nowhere near meta, and so it wasn't an offensive thing to people's sensibility because of its efficacy. The raw concept of it in the past, I don't necessarily agree with. I think it should be very, very refined where you see, like, minion-y builds. And so that's fine. I also like, they've technically now been reclassified to wells, which I enjoy because that means it hooks into more runes, and the build craft is a little bit more interesting, and I guess technically, they're AoEs and wells we consider AoEs. These are sort of like mobile AoEs now. Now, that's a strong change in and of itself because of this one thing. The gyros now move with you and are uncounterable in the ways they used to be. They used to just get cleaved down instantly, so whatever. But now because they don't, their effects in several situations have radically changed. Like, for example, the blast gyro here is now a lot like Harbinger Shroud. It's got this big animation, it curls in, it explodes out, and does the launch AoE around you unblockably so. And, this is actually kind of a skill now. So, the change was really good from the sense that the raw design behind it, I think, is actually very intelligent. And also, it's strong enough to have made Scrapper a thing. So, there's a lot of people really upset with Scrapper as it is now because it's very powerful, potentially extreme. I mean, if you're seeing 4 a game, I'm going to go ahead and say it. I think it's OP. So people aren't happy with the power level it's at. But the pros of the patch are that you're seeing more elite specialization representation now. Scrapper was probably one of the bottom on the pile. Now, if you look back at my game of the day last season, I know it's not going on at the moment, but you'll see I did give you a couple of Scrapper games, at least one, and you could kind of play it. But it was very vulnerable, and, it had some really good matchups. In fact, it was particularly good against Weevil, which could shrug off damage from a lot of other places, just because if it snapped its power pressure in at the right time, and I demonstrated that in some bonus clips for you all. So Scrapper kind of existed, sure, before this, but, there were little things that people didn't like. The function gyro clunkiness, its power level was just too low. And now, there's loads of Scrappers, so in that sense, it's good. Not only is it just diversification of the elite specialization pool, which is, you know, going to create more divergent game experiences in theory, and you're going to be reacting to more different animations, and it keeps the game fresh. Not only is it that, and now we're dealing as opponents of scrappers with function gyros and things, but it's also the utility skills being ran as well are drastically different. They're gyros people are using. You know, you can see I've got 3 gyros loaded on my bar. A lot of scrappers are on sneak gyro, and a lot of scrappers are on purge gyro. That's the full set almost, except Shredder, right? I haven't seen anyone really testing or playing with Shredder in PvP. But that's a lot of new skills. When you looked at Scrapper pre-patch, it was kind of doubling up on stuff you saw Hollows running anyway, like Elixir U and Elixir S, things that we know are overpowered and just a part of the engineer's kit and kind of relies on, or like Scrappers on frickin' Thumper turret and running like prot Scrappers and stuff. So, or Scrappers trying to augment their mobility with rocket boots, which we see on the other places. So, you know, it's a lot of new stuff we're seeing, and in that way, I do like the change. I like seeing these skills being ran, and usefully so, to a much higher incidence rate than they used to be. So that's all cool. There are some other nice things as well going on, because we're kind of in that primordial soup of, hey, what is the best build? There's a lot of theory craft and a lot of divergence in how people are choosing to run Scrapper. So I want to go through a couple of the different decisions that Scrappers are making. So this is the build I'm running, and it's probably my favorite variant so far after maybe 7 to 10 games, and I don't profess to be a good Scrapper whatsoever. The build I'm on is Demolisher. So the reason I'm going Demo instead of like Marauder is because Demo trades the Vitality for Toughness. That can give you some trait synergy, but also that essentially just puts you more into a resustain build rather than a build you'd rather have support at mid or whatever. Because now your healing counts for more, essentially, right? So let me just leave it at the door. People who know the difference between a Marauder and Demolisher can go further. Maybe I should do a spotlight on that. Anyway, I'm running Demo Amulet. For my sigils, I'm running actually Cleansing and Energy, but I'm thinking of getting rid of Cleansing, and I'll explain why in a second, to go Courage. Courage is actually a really good sigil. You know, just rolls a lot more might and helps this build achieve a lot of pressure. Because it's a very tanky build, and you want damage where you can get it. And for my runes, I'm actually on Sanctuary right now, but there's also available Earth. A lot of people have been running. So the difference between Earth and Sanctuary is Earth gives you protection, which gives you trait synergies, essentially. Sanctuary gives you, essentially, stronger heals. Because Earth gives you 10% incoming heals, while Sanctuary gives you 20% of heals into Barrier. And Sanctuary has the added benefit on Scrapper of comboing with Impact Savant, which means your barriers are stronger. Now, Wiki doesn't say, and I've not seen any forum theorycraft on this. So, Impact Savant improves the strength of your barriers. Sanctuary Rune gives you barriers whenever you heal. But are they actually comboing? If they are, then obviously it's a really good pick, but I don't know whether they actually are. At the very least, Sanctuary Rune is offering you the 5% damage increase from Impact Savant more often. But this is kind of the classic, since the Rune Overhaul Scrapper kind of pick, Sanctuary. There's also a difference between Earth and Sanctuary in that you've got Toughness versus Vitality. And I actually prefer the Vitality this time, since we're Demolishers. Rounding out a bit of Vitality is kind of nice. But so that's one kind of big decision that Scrappers are making, and that's my favorite choice so far. But also, another nice output of the change, and because we're in the primordial soup, as I say, there's a lot of interesting decisions people are making, such as Chrono Runes. So because they're now Wells, you can pick up Quickness whenever you pop a Gyro. So Chrono is much more aggressive, right? It's power, it's precision. It ekes more damage into the builds, and is probably the healthier choice for the overall meta, because Scrappers are way too sustaining. I'll get into that in a second. Personally, I'm not convinced Chrono Runes are that good at the moment. And then finally, actually, possibly my true favorite is Melandru Runes. So Melandru is Toughness, a bit of Vitality, but it's reduced Condi duration. Now, we already have reasonable cleanse, right? Very good cleanse. But the main reason I actually like Melandru is 20% less incoming stun duration. And the reason I say that is because based on the way that you play Scrapper, one of its main counters right now is getting CC locked and power pressured down. Something warriors are very good at. And so the minus 20% stun duration could potentially actually be a way through that. And so actually I kind of like Melandru Runes. And anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that Scrapper has been added to the game, and there's actually a lot of interesting things going on with the rune meta game at the moment that people are talking about. So that's been kind of fun. Then when we look at the actual traits, I don't think much of this stuff is in dispute for a lot of people, really. A lot are on invention, so whenever you grant prot, you cleanse. They're on mecha legs because this is an extremely immobile build. Yes, you can get reasonable super speed based on how you run the scrapper traits, but mecha legs is just extremely good, and namely better than what you're looking on the others here. Then also smoke, but the auto defense smoke bomber. So when you get CC'd, you drop a blind field, which hopefully helps with those pesky warriors. But in truth, you know, they've probably got a bit of resist in their kit anyway, and they'll just burst you through the blind. The other selections just aren't that good in general. I mean, this could be incredible for medic gyro synergy, but I've not really played with it. And on 120-second cooldown, hey. For alchemy, most of this is non-disputed by people. It's just go all the protection stuff you can. Prot when you're disabled, and thus cleanse when you're disabled. Prot on emergency elixir, thus cleanse on emergency elixir. Barrier on emergency elixir, thus impact savant on emergency elixir. And then purity of purpose. Whenever you cleanse, say with our super elixir, we turn it into a boon. If we cleansed vuln, then we gave ourselves prot, which triggers anti-corrosion plating, which once again triggers purity of purpose, right? So you just roll through these, this is just all very strong. Now, as for the scrapper stuff, there's a lot people are playing with. This is basically a dead trait, applied force. I don't really believe in applied force, even if you're running some might generation stuff. That's fine. But kinetic stabilizers versus adaptive barrier, I don't know just yet. Rapid regeneration versus mass momentum, I don't know just yet. I'm not 100% sure on expert examination. Maybe this is the way through power matchups. And then even here, shocking speed, this which is, you know, newly changed as of everything became the world. So you get the super speed is really strong, but it's also really hard to give up a bit of stability from perfectly weighted. Without this stability, again, the CC locks are nasty, and especially when you go into like big team fights. So anyway, this is kind of the way that I've enjoyed running it right now, as you can see on screen. I'm not claiming to be an expert, but you can see all the different places where different picks are that people are looking at, and I find this stuff truly kind of fun. Looking at utilities, the other thing I would say is for the gyros, you got a couple of cool choices. One is the Blast Gyro. Now, this is my absolute favorite pick right now, and this is one of the coolest things from the change, because Blast Gyro was such a joke of a skill before. The reason Blast Gyro is so good to me is, first of all, the might it gives you is extraordinary. It's 11 might, just on the one skill. And, you know, you combo that with your Courage Sigil, you've started to roll the might to a levels where, and hammer hits really hard, and if you're taking the hammer trait, as you see that I'm taking, you can kill a lot of things. It takes you time, but you can kill them while also being super sustaining, and that's what you need as a side noder, right? So I really like the might on it. I think that's very under-recognized by people. But also, it's an AoE blowout. So if you, drop your Thunderclap a second before you know this triggers, you can deny their dodge of the Blast Gyro, score your own decaps, even through your team's ineptitude, and you can score your own even full caps over a long enough period of time. You'll obviously win the cap against very flighty builds like Thieves and Mesmers. But also the tool belt thing. So again, the main counter to Scrapper at the moment is CC Lock and Warrior, and this actually gives you a second stun break. None of the gyros by default give you stun breaks. It's only here on the tool belt of the most offensive gyro. So you can get the bypass coated, and then the super speed as well allows you to do good kites and easy jumping puzzles around nodes on the more complicated maps. I just think this has the most playmaking potential. But people like Purge as well. Obviously, every time Purge is cleansing now on this build, it's giving you boons. And and you get like the chemical field, I suppose, which you can combo for weakness. But I don't know whether I really think it's as high impact. But that's one of the decisions people are making. I don't really think Elixir Gun is negotiable because, again, the stun break. I think 2 stun breaks is really nice. But yeah, so you got that decision there, at least with just the skills you're running. But then the Elite. Now, this one's really fascinating and fun. Do you go Mortar or do you go Sneak Gyro? And I adore this because you've got other Hollow builds, like Prot Hollow are kind of choosing whether they're a Mortar kit, let's be real. But when you've got Core NGs and some of them running around, they might be on Elixir X. No one's really running Crate, obviously. But Hollows have got Prime Light Beam, and now you've got this extra decision to round out these other elites. There's like a lot of, people using the various skills that Engineer has. A lot of them are actually being seen. And this is a really fun decision. Basically, Mortar is obscenely strong if you think you're going to be alone on the side node a lot, because this is what really can win nodes over time and win them very quickly against, you know, particularly non-robust other players if they're not running side node specs. This just slams AoEs on the ground. The AoE blinds is so much sustain as long as you're on point. You can do some nice little things as well. Obviously, it's got a blast for you, which you can use in any number of your gyro fields and things. So yeah, Mortar is really good. It's kind of like if you are gonna be for sure fighting a lot, and you're actually in that position to hold your nodes. But then there's the sneak gyro. Now, I've already mentioned on several videos how crazy strong this is. It's exactly as I speculated in that initial balance speculative when we had the notes. The enemy cannot see anything. They don't see the smoke field. You don't even see... Well, you do see the smoke field. But this thing... This isn't just an AoE marker. I guess it's showing a smoke field at the same time. This thing is obscenely strong. Now, the sneak gyro is way better if you are consistently having to rotate into larger engagements, because this thing is absurd for like securing reses. The stealth is just so strong. Thieves can reposition in it and you just walk back over them. It's like a mass invis on crack. It's continuously pulsing. But also, this is a really good skill if you're consistently pushing to the larger fights. It could potentially be a game where you're behind a lot. And this thing isn't that mobile. If you're getting decapped frequently, or the enemy team is plussing, so the footage, hopefully I've been intersplicing in today's video, is an awful game where I'm losing. And I knew I was going to lose this basically on the opening board based on composition. It's a really horrible game, and it's an example of what's so bad about Scrap at the moment. Again, I'll get into in a second. But like the enemy team knew how to plus. They knew how to plus until a decap went through and then leave. Or they knew how to plus until a full cap went through and then leave. People don't know these fundamentals about PvP anymore. They just kind of spam skills. They don't really know when it's healthy to leave or when it's healthy to stay. And so if you kind of rolling the dice a lot of the time on a build like this because it's so focused on that one part of the map. If your team's letting you down, you kind of can't do much when you're on Mortar. But when you're on Sneak Gyro, there's a lot of playmaking potential where it's like, okay, I cannot win that node against the enemy bunker, so I will Sneak Gyro. He'll leave, and then I can decap him for free kind of thing. Or I can Sneak Gyro, he anticipates that I'll stay, so instead I'm just going to walk to mid and outnumber at mid. You can mind game with the Sneak Gyro really heavily, just because it's so much stealth for free. Also, because lots of other scrappers are running Sneak Gyro, it then becomes a good pick, because you get the detection pulse to counter them. Don't forget, this was buffed to an absurd radius of 1200 radius. Not range. There's an enormous circle around me right now. It just de-stealths everything there. So, you know, the Sneak Gyro versus Mortar is really nice based on the kind of game that you're going to be playing. And it's not a set-in-stone choice that people, I think, will ever make, actually. So that's a lot of fun stuff, I think. It really is. There's interesting build craft. And that's the state of Scrapper. So I'm really happy about a lot of the stuff I just said there in terms of the fun decisions people are making and the stuff you start seeing in the game. And I'll reiterate what I opened the video with, which is, out of all balance patches I've really experienced, this one's been very dramatic. And it's funny that this is also on a release where the notes were announced early and no one really predicted it, because it's hard to know how strong the gyros were and how defensively crept they'd become until you actually get to go in and play and get a feel for it. One of the really exciting things I wanted to make this video to talk to you guys about as a result of Scrapper being added to the game, I've kind of been alluding to, is it's actually kind of a really good patch for warriors now. Now, the reason for this is that this currently power crept Scrapper is eating Mirage alive. Condi Mirage specifically, side node Chaos Mirage. It is pretty much impossible to win a node against a halfway decent Scrapper when you're playing one of those tanky, Condi spammy, Infinite Horizon, brain dead builds, of which I've been so partial to over the most recent month or so. Scrappers come along and just force them away. Now, by getting rid of them, you may say all on its own, hey, that's an amazing change, but that's been really good for Warriors, because those Mirage variants was the one thing that was destroying Warrior. So pre-patch, Warrior kind of felt bad because it was like, wow, I just can't do anything against Mirage. Now the Scrappers have come in and pushed all the Mirages away, and turns out Warrior does very well against Scrapper. So Warrior kind of has a double reason to be better right now. Its worst matchup has been eliminated, and a new matchup has arrived, which it excels in. Warrior is probably the best way to take out Scrappers right now. I've had some really nasty defeats where you can only go so long before you hit some big CC chain, and eventually they will destroy you, or they'll take you out very quickly. Again, that's why I'm such an advocate for the double stun break and actually taking stability on trait as well. I just really think you need these things to get anywhere near Warriors at the moment, and even then I'm pretty bad at it. So yeah, it's been really interesting to see that matrix there and how Warriors have actually kind of stepped forward, and I don't think a lot of people are talking about that. This obscenely overpowered gross Scrapper variant that's in the game right now has done a lot for that class. But so yeah, let's talk about that side of things, how overpowered it is, how defensive it is. Now, I still do stand by everything I said in this video about what I enjoy, about seeing new skills, about interesting decisions that have come a party to this, but it's obviously over the line. 4 Scrappers in a single game? Come on. Let me just be very clear. It's way OP right now. Really, really, really far too defensive. And I'm expecting significant nerfs rapidly, I would hope as well, from ArenaNet. There's a very real problem. When something becomes overpowered in PvP, okay, if it's offensively overpowered, it's bad, and you're going to see a lot of it, and fine. But it doesn't grind the game to a death halt. It doesn't particularly mess too much with the game. The game just becomes boring because you see the same thing over and over. You can at least make plays around glassy builds, okay? And things at least happen when it's glassy builds and offensively power creep stuff. When it's defensively power creep stuff, that's where things get really ugly and dangerous and burns people out. That's what burned me out of it back in the day. That's what burned people out when Chronobunk, the ultimate, you know, the crown jewel example of this. And Scrapper is an offensively sorry, I say offensively as in I'm offended by this. It is an overpowered defensive build. It is way too tanky. Any good Scrapper that knows how to kite just a little bit can do ugly, ugly things to the game right now where just nothing's dying. It's really boring. So, there need to be nerfs, and I think most people would agree with that. I will be interested to see in the channel comments of this video if anyone disagrees with that. And I wanted to put forward my suggestions for what should actually be nerfed in terms of, you know, why this is so strong. Because what I would want to do is I would want to preserve everything I said in this video so far. I want the gyros to still be used. I want Scrapper to still... I want it to be like, oh, there's some hollows and there's some Scrappers, and you don't cringe by seeing a Scrapper on your team. I want to see these animations still in effect. I want to see the blast gyro especially still be around after the patch, and the hammer usage and so on. So the nerf can't be too much, obviously, but it's got to be like a specifically oriented thing. And it's difficult because a lot of what's so OP is actually the Alchemy Inventions combo. But the thing is, the Alchemy Inventions combo, I think, is enabled because Hammer has so much damage on it. You can run... This is kind of like a triple defensive line you're looking at here, right? Scrapper being a support-y, as the devs... From the devs' own mouths, they wanted it to be kind of support-oriented. Specialization with the 2 tanky lines, right? And it can still sort of kill things and do things because of... Especially on Node, because of its AoE capacity with the Acid Bomb and the Thunderclap, and then especially if you're in more as well. So maybe you'd say, oh, well, we just need to nerf the hammer damage so that they just can't kill anything ever if they run triple defensive line. I think that's dangerous, though. The point is to reduce the defensive capabilities, not the offensive stuff, like I just explained. So I would actually leave that stuff as it is. I would look purely at gyros. And I think it's because it's the gyro change that built these Scrappers. So there's a middle ground between where gyros were and where they are now, that we're at a decent balance. So I would stay purely focused on gyros for now, and then you also don't mess with other synergies with core NG builds should they ever, you know, flourish one day, or whatever currently lurks in the background right now, and hollow builds, and prot hollow. And so, I mean, prot hollow people had their problems with as well, and this is kind of like prot hollow on crack. So anyway, to get to it, I would look at the gyros themselves. One of the most important ones is Bulwark. Bulwark is now like splashing tons of barrier out, as you can see, and this is to save you while you are taking incoming damage from your allies. But the way that they've implemented is very binary. You don't need any allies there to still benefit from all of the barrier. So I'm wondering if what they should do is tweak the barrier so that It's as packets of damage from allies are being redistributed to you, that's when the personal barrier comes in. And aside from that, maybe all you get is the initial barrier. Either that or just play with the numbers. One thing I would say globally for all gyros is their cooldowns are way too low. Like, you just play this build a couple of games, guys, and you'll be like, oh, I can just spam my gyros. Almost it feels that way because they just come up so frequently. They're up again, and they're up again. Now, look at this, especially Purge Gyro as well. I mean, that might be one thing holding it in, because I'm not convinced Purge Gyro is that good. I would always take Elixir Gun over it, because Elixir Gun gives you a stun break, it gives you the poison, it gives you the acid bomb on top, it gives you the super elixir, which is great heals as well at the same time. I just think that Elixir Gun kind of has everything more. But, you know, Purge Gyro is it's only on a 20-second cooldown. It comes down so quickly. So I think cooldowns across the board for gyros would be a really good thing to hit. I think the barrier on the bulwark is a really important thing to hit. I would actually leave Blast exactly as it is because it's an offensively geared thing with interesting playmaking potential just by having a little bit of super speed on there. And the Sneak Gyro may need significant changes because this is just so powerful during reses. If it does eventually get to the point where the scrappers decide they never need mortar kit and they can all be on sneak and they're all intelligent about sneak, the game could get really, really hideous. I'm not sure I like the fact that Scrapper, beyond Mesmer with its massive viz and beyond Thief, Scrapper is the one with such a potent stealth ability here at the moment. I don't know. And I'm just not sure it's healthy right now. I'm also not sure it's healthy that the biggest counter to Sneak Gyro is to add more scrappers with more sneak gyros. That doesn't seem good. But yeah, so that's my initial impressions. First impressions from the scrapper change. I just wanted to run through over the first 2 days with you guys. And, you know, the pros, the cons. A lot of people are grumpy about it because of the, you know, just how grindy the game has become and how slow and sleepy the game's become. And I totally agree with that. But the impulse of this patch has been really cool. And I hope the devs find that middle ground quick. I don't want to wait like 2 months for them to act on this. I think they need to look at the gyros quite quickly. Let's just hope some of the balance team are watching people's streams and videos and playing themselves and actually know what happened. Because a lot of the rest of this balance patch seemed more world versus world geared, you know, with the Harbinger Shroud and the War Banner change and the Winds of Disenchantment change. That's more about world versus world clash stuff than PvP. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this first impression. I'm doing this video just to throw this out there as a platform for discussion down below. So please do you know, talk to one another and myself in the comments about what you felt with all of this, and be more constructive than just one sentence saying, "Oh my god, it's so bad." There are fun things to say here, even if this is really obnoxious right now. So yeah, thanks guys. See you next time.